just acknowledge the elephant in the room?
Let's please. My weight.
No,
My arms.
sir, you are very handsome and shape is on your side. We're not on a patio.
Yeah.
What's interesting is like I started this mission thinking that I was going to find people on their patios of peace, and I am now creating a story that your patio of peace actually exists inside of this studio because peace can be manufactured here. Is this real?
Yes, and also it was a patio at some point before they put the roof on.
Well, wait a second. All of a sudden, we are actually in a patio. It's just now...
It's a closed patio.
A closed patio.
With HVAC.
With air conditioning. On a humid day, by the way.
On a very humid day.
A very strong
I
move.
thank you that this could be the patio. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of like, like adjusting.
I wore this shirt yesterday.
Yeah,
I don't want you to think that I am a recycler of shirts, but I wore this shirt yesterday. Got to my first patio,
and you were like, I have grossly underestimated
the humidity. My ability to perspire was on display.
Your body was like, we got to do it. I'm sorry,
let's
dude.
go.
Like,
let's go. Let's get through this shirt. Let's get through this shirt.
Yes.
So the conceit of this here is I am trying to understand from other people first where peace is found for them. And so in the midst of, you got these 3 kids, you're writing this music, you're every once in a while being comedic, having a podcast called Dadville, all these things, right?
Yeah.
How do you find peace?
You know, this is going to feel like such a manufactured answer, but it's true. I think the older I get, it has to be from my relationship with God. And I think that's, but I can feel some people are like, come on, man, the canned answer. But I think it's really that, it's that simple and true for me. And it's really become more of a revelation the older I get. Because I think I try to go to these other places that I think will give me that. And I just think it's so important to have, as best as I can, and I'm terrible at this, but some sort of daily moment with God in prayer and reading, just to kind of, because I can't get that anywhere else.
Yeah.
I can get really great things other places that are fun and exciting and liberating and whatever, but I just can't quite get that. I can't. And I love my job. I love sitting in here writing songs. It's my favorite thing in the world. But it's still not the same thing,
Yeah.
Because even on the best days, it causes more energy that isn't exactly like peaceful,
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that's a big part.
My conceit with a patio, not that it was necessarily a thing I would have liked to have to lean on, was this like idea of like, hey, there's so much chaos that's happening in my life in real times. If I can manufacture something intentionally that allows me to put a little bit of a roadblock against some of the noise that might come in.
Yeah.
But that secondarily, I might actually also access God was certainly part of it. I, in the book, wrote a line that is from, I want to say James 4:6, I think, which is, draw closer to God, he'll draw closer to you. And at a time when I needed God more than ever, and also was struggling with my faith more than I ever had because of some of the stuff that was going on, it was this like intentional time in a still space where I was like, all right, I'm on my knees. I need you. I'm going to try and draw closer to you and understand why or what is happening. And yet, maybe in this stillness, you can meet me here.
Not to get preaching.
Let's go. Let's go.
Son of a preacher, man. Flex. That was really sad. It's really not that impressive. I think that to me is such a timely word for our culture. And I think the part of in Christendom that is really struggling with sort of these walk it backward, which I think is fine. I think John Mark Comer has great thoughts on this. Like, it is okay to deconstruct. It really is. God is bigger than that. It's not. But can you do it in a space that still has scripture? It has church. It has community. It has prayer, because that's the best place to do. Like, and I think that word, that verse, is so unbelievably profound to me, because the idea is to press in, not to leave. And it's so admirable to see you do that. I think that's such an incredible, it shows a lot of wherewithal, and I think you being able to walk through that season and be where you are now is absolutely contingent on that thing.
Yeah. What's interesting though is there were times at the very beginning where it was the last thing I wanted.
Oh.
Right? Because I was yelling into the sky and crying into a pillow, and I didn't love the idea of believing in some of the things I believed in because it couldn't,
for sure.
It just didn't compute. Why do hard things happen? Why do bad things happen? And all of that. And yet, I can now see on the other side of pushing toward God and being closer in community with people that were reminding me of my truth in the midst of me questioning it, that, oh, no. Some of what is happening here is actually a function of building a stronger faith and helping get you closer to something that maybe you were missing in thinking that things were working as well as they were when they weren't, and now that they aren't, you're going to see it.
And why do we as a church think that God's like, you're mad at me? Out.
Right?
I'm like, has anybody read any of the Psalms?
Right?
I mean, that is a bunch of dudes who are just like railing at times. I mean, David is just going off. And it feels to me throughout Scripture, God gets closer. It's not the opposite.
Yeah.
And so I think it's such a good word.
It's interesting too. I mean, you said the word deconstruction. And like, this is not the point necessarily even of the conversation, but I think it's interesting to find someone who I can have a conversation with, whether it's you, my pastor at my church in real time is doing something that I am just like terrified and excited by, which is having a conversation about how big our God is to handle our questions of deconstruction.
Love that.
In the midst of preaching. He's having this conversation, and I don't know where we came up with this idea of having a fragile God that couldn't handle our doubt or our frustration or our deconstruction, and it's
I think when our leaders, including any of us that are in any kind of limelight spotlight, are fragile, sadly, I think that gets attached to the image of God. And I think when we purvey that as an ideology to the community, then that gets attached, as opposed to going, what your preacher's doing is like, I don't know that answer. But it doesn't scare me. Like, I'm sorry I can't help you. Let's pray about it and hope that God can provide the answer. Maybe he can't, but at least he can give you peace in the midst of it. But I think
what's interesting, to be honest, though, is I appreciate that he's said, hey, I'm okay with not knowing every answer. And it actually immediately for the congregation is like, well, wait a second. I don't know if I'm okay with you as the church leader not knowing every answer, because I just come to you for the prescription. Take these twice a day. Everything will be fine. Do these things. Check these boxes. And when that list is gone, or when it's questioned as to whether or not it's actually the thing that's going to get you closer, make you, quote unquote, right. It's a little bit scary. But he's also modeling that it's okay to live inside of that ambiguous space that maybe in the ambiguity has you asking questions that you wouldn't have asked if not for the ambiguity. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. God's big enough. Handle these questions. Now I'm going to try and get a little bit closer, and maybe in getting closer, he'll come closer to me.
Well, it's a faith. Isn't it? Isn't that the whole thing?
No, I know. It's not just a list of things you got to do.
It's not.
I know.
Like, I think for all of us, that's the scariest part, but I think that's where some of the most beautiful growth, and to your point, peace comes from.
Yeah. So this book of mine is about courage. It's really about this idea of having the courage to every day walk a little bit closer to this version of who you were put on this planet to be.
Wow.
And the big idea is that you, Dave Barnes, me, Dave Hollis, every listener listening today was created with very deliberate and specific intention.
Wow.
Right? That there's no mistake in any of our wiring, any of our experiences, any of our emotions, any of our love, the way that we feel. All of those things were intentionally given, which makes us this limited edition, one of one. There is no one like us. And with that, in that intention, our job here on this planet is to every day walk a little closer to honoring the intention of our Creator.
Man, I love that.
But man, that takes courage. Right? That takes courage, because so many of the things that our intention may require could press against what our family of origin thinks, or what other moms are doing, or how we worry about what it will feel like when we try something and fail. I'm curious, in your life, in your world, like when you think about the intention of your Creator, like you're doing something and creating music that I can tell just from the way that you talk about it lights you up. But was there a time where you didn't necessarily feel like you could? Were you always in a place where you were like, yeah, man, pursue that music. It's going to be the thing that's going to bring your gifts to bear. It's going to honor the intention of your Creator. Did it ever take courage to step into what you're doing today?
I think it takes courage weekly, if not like daily, every other day. There's so many conversations I've had with my wife throughout my career the highest highs, the lowest lows, where I was like, I just think I don't want to do this anymore. And she so many times was the voice of reason going like, you know that's not true. This is either really hard or it's great and you're scared, or it's bad and you're scared.
Yeah.
It's funny, those are the same things. But for me at least. And so I think it's never, I think to assuage any sort of suspicions by people that go, man, it seems like things are sort of working, and I'm thankful for where I am, but it takes courage all the time. And here's the thing that I think is really tricky about success, is I would argue it takes more courage on the other side of success, whatever you deem that to be, than it does maybe on the front part, because we just can't, it's so hard to know what that's going to look like. And then when it starts to happen, that's a big part of my story, is I feel like I just really underestimated. I had no game plan for what would happen if it actually worked.
Yeah.
And then you have a whole new set of courage, sort of arrows in the bow you've got to learn how to use, or hopefully be able to use. So I think for me, it's still a daily thing. It's like there's new little battles I have to wage every day, if it's just in my head, and the voices that I hear that I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
And that's why the peace element is so important, is to hear the real voice, the real truth, to kind of squash the things and then to have courage, and then to go, oh yeah, that's right, that is who I am. That's what I'm made to do. This is what gives me life and joy.
I am so fascinated by this, real quick. So I've experienced the same kind of thing, in that I built a big career. Mm-hmm. I was at the height of having achieved the success as dictated or decided by society, like, if you get to this level or make this kind of money or have this kind of access, then you'll be successful. I thought if I could get there, I'd be more lovable, I'd be more affirmed in being enough, or whatever it ends up being. And as I got there, I was like, I'm not sure that this is actually honoring the intention of my creator, right? I don't know that this is the best use of my potential. And I decided to make a jump from a corporate environment into the things I do today. But after having created that kind of success, I became, in my head, so aware of my worry of what other people might say, because of their now measuring me against the kind of success that I had previously. Yeah. So as you've achieved success in your career early on, what are the voices, what are the stories that you hear? How
much time do we have? And I can do it in numerous languages, too. I will say, before I say that, to just encourage what you've said, there's a podcast called Broken Record, and it's Malcolm Gladwell and Rick Rubin, but Rick Rubin has Andre 3000 on. And if you guys get a chance to listen to that episode with Rick and Andre, it is, I can call him Dre. I'm going to call him Dre, I'm going to call him Dre. It is one of the most insightful moments into an artist's brain and a creative's brain. But one of the things that he says is, all we're really trying to do is get back to being that 5-year-old in the room playing. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem with success is, it's like it blows, all of a sudden that bedroom is a stage and there's people in the audience. So it's like, what was this wonderful little incubated thing you're playing and messing up and then having success and then blah, blah, and you're like, this is so fun. All of a sudden success blows those walls off, and you look out and you're like, oh my God, there's a lot of people. And they're like, and you're like,
which toy is he going to play with?
Yeah, like, okay, watch. Okay, he is not playing with the crayons. He has moved to Sharpies. That's confidence, folks. That is confidence. So I think, all of a sudden you're so self-aware. Yeah. And I think I think the things that I struggle with, and I tell you, are really weird about my industry, and I wonder if this would translate to your experience. But I know in entertainment, it's so much like professional athletes to me, because your trajectory is really tight and fast. Mm-hmm. And so, you're pretty much, a lot of people are done by 35. Oh. Again, like a wide receiver or whatever the analogy sport you want to use. But, it's quick, it's fast, it can be amazingly successful, but it still doesn't have the legs to be. So it's fat, and this is where Acuff and those guys have such cool thoughts about these kind of trajectories. But where somebody in their 40s is becoming an expert in most fields, you're just hitting your stride. You're like, here we go. I'm getting my second win. Now I know what I'm doing. For, us, that's 30. Wow. And so the tail is a pretty wicked thing. It's a conversation I have with a lot of my friends. It's sort of like, but what happens if you still love to do it, but you can start to feel a little bit of the winds of change? Where you're
if you're starting to play against the tail.
Yes.
Which I can't even imagine. Yeah. Wait, we got to play it safer, guys. We don't want that tail.
That's exactly
right. We got to not take this creative chance.
What are the kids listening to?
Right.
Bieber, what's he doing with his hair? I'll do it. Okay, face tattoos? God, it's commitment, but I'll do it. It's like you start going, what is it? what does it take to stay in the game? Like, how do I stay healthy? How do I, if you're the 35 you're a wide receiver that everybody loves and respects, but you got a 21-year-old kid who's running circles around you. You're like, I just want to stay on the team.
Yeah.
I'll be on special teams. And so I think that's the thing. That's a lot of the sort of chatter I have to watch in my head. Is that sort of like, dude, it's done. Nobody cares, and and trying to really, know how to navigate that. And but it's a lot of things. It's like there's creativity's weird. I mean, I think that the well is always got water in it, but it's just different. When you've written a song, it'd be like, you writing a book, you have, let's say 10 years from now, you have amazing new thoughts about courage. You got to deal with the fact that, like, I kind of already did it.
I did.
How do I iterate that in a way that doesn't, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And how many songs can you write about love? How many songs
so
can you
funny.
write about?
I had this conversation with Acuff yesterday. I was like, hey, when you think, it was not even when we were recording, but I was like, hey, in your creative process, do you have to consider the library of what has been created so that you are completely and discreetly creating new, or can you create some two-hander moments? And he had start and finish. There are, I think, some things that you can do.
Yeah.
But I find myself very conscientious of, did I talk about that already?
Yeah.
Is that an okay thing for me to now talk about again? My thoughts have changed, but I already covered the topic. I'm sure it's the same way in
Well, and
music.
I think, too, if you look at the arc, and I think this is biblical, I mean, I think there is something to the way that God made our lives work, and that I can't shake feeling like that's kind of how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
You think about, the book Halftime. I think he was really onto it, like this idea that, like, it's gonna look like, I can grid out for this kind of everybody that came to the show today, I can grid this out for you. You're probably gonna have a lot of productivity and success and fun, but there's gonna be a moment where there's a younger better, or you're kind of tired of it, or you're going back to the well and you're like, there's a little bit, if we move it, is the sun just,
Yeah.
And and I think that's why this thing it suddenly turns other focused. Benevolence. How do I help those younger? How do I? Because I just think there is a little bit of an atrophy. Not that we can't keep doing it. Because the irony is, and the thing that frustrates me the most is, you're the best you've ever been right now.
100%.
And so then you got to deal with this weird battle of going, I'm seeing it. I'm going this. I'm like, I've never known so much. And then you're also going, but maybe less people care.
Right.
So you're having to do this weird.
You know what's really interesting, though, is that, like, part of what I can connect to that correlates with best I've ever been is that I am more connected to who I wanted to be before I became who I'd become than I've ever been. Right?
That's really great.
There was a 19-year-old who wanted to be Dan Rather, that wanted to grow up and be a reporter. And I ended up jumping into the entertainment business thinking, like, well, one day I'll find a way to put myself in that anchor's desk because I'll just grow as an executive and then I can make the executive decision. And now I find myself as an author and a podcaster and a coach reporting, luckily not about the news, but reporting and storytelling in the way that 18, 19-year-old version of me wanted to. And that is like, oh, I'm connected to this passion point that was in me at the beginning and that I lost somewhere along the way. And so for anyone who's listening, you're like, man, I just keep on getting this whisper. Is it the voice of God? Is it my intuition? Is it my knowing or whatever? Like, there's a whole host of things that people call it. Listen to it, because there's a good chance it's this whisper of a 2 decades ago version of you begging to be paid attention to, that, hey, this is who you wanted to be before you became who you've become. If you just spend some time with me, I promise there's fulfillment and purpose.
Well, and I tell you, too, the danger of my self-talk, Acuff's soundtrack, this book is a huge plug for that. It's so genius about this, which is funny because it's just like cleverly disguised gospel, which I think even Acuff would sort of admit to. But, like, I just feel like, Solomon's like, what? No, nice original idea. A shot called this thousands of years ago. But, like, just this idea that, like, that's a danger to me, is we can get so wrapped up in our heads about the self-narrating. And, and you're going, and this is what's happened. It's been great, but now I'm doing it, and it's so good. It's bad. And then the power, to your point, of getting around people that can speak into that. I talked to the guy the other day. God is so kind with these moments. But I was talking to a friend of mine. He sent this sweet text, but he's like, man, it's just so encouraging seeing you hear how well it's working. You've just been so focused. And first thing I did was shut him down. I've not been focused. I'm doing all these things. And he shot back like, no, actually, because he was asking if I had like a Spotify songwriter thing. And I was like, I don't have a Spotify one, but Apple made one for me. It's really cool. It's all the songs written for other people. And he was like, I just love how focused you are. I shot back no, you're wrong. I'm terrible. And he was like, No, that's not true. The first thing you ever told me when we met is that you wanted to write songs for people. And it was like this really sobering moment. And I think that's the power of community and getting out of our heads and getting around people that can go, no, I remember you telling me you're 18 you wanted to, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I've forgotten that because I'm like, instead of having those moments where you sit with people and they can go, hey, can I tell you what we've seen and what's happening? Or just the beauty of having somebody go, man, it just seems like things have really worked for you in this space.
Right.
And you're kind of like, oh.
Wow. Is that what you think?
Yeah, maybe they have.
Well, it's an interesting thing, though, because courage is something that, man, I want to help people cultivate in the book, or that I'd hope that anyone just has naturally flowing in their bones. But flowing in their bones?
I like that. I was actually
blood,
way into that.
Doesn't matter how things flow. But
can that be the tagline?
Yeah, flowing in their built through courage, flowing in your bones.
Trademark.
But there are times when you have to borrow courage from somebody else who's got more access to it. I mean, I know at the beginning of my divorce, I was just like, grief was present.
Yeah.
And God bless him, my pastor sent this same text every single day, 11 words every single day. Same thing every single day. What small piece of sadness can I hold for you today?
Jeez Louise.
And it was just this suggestion that he was walking with me. It wasn't like, I want to try and convince you that it's going to be better, or that it's not as bad as it seems, or that I have some silver bullet solution. It was, this is heavy.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hold just a small piece of it if I can, so that you don't feel alone. And that act was just hey, have a little piece of my heart, but also maybe you can cultivate a little bit of courage to believe that this is going to get better over time by knowing that you're not walking through it alone.
That I can't tell you how important I think that is. It grieves me that so much of the chatter we see and how many megaphones we have to do incredible good these days. If it's just texts on a phone or social media or Twitter, there are a million ways that we could encourage people today, and instead we do the opposite. And I'm like, I just can't speak enough to how much my life has been and was changed by people that stepped in and gave me courage.
Yeah.
Changed my life.
Yeah.
If I hadn't had people that were doing what I wanted to do, step out of their life, acknowledge me, and go like, hey, you should do this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think I would have scrapped along trying, but there's no way I would have brought the courage that I had to be like, well, he's great and she's great. Well, if they're right, they think I'm great. Maybe I'm
great. So big. No, it's so huge, especially if you're trying something new.
Yes.
Right? Like I've been in this season of just saying yes to a whole host of things, but walking alongside people who've already done these new things and having them say like, oh, this is what you ought to expect. Or when I fall down, they're like, oh, I remember falling at that same spot.
Same spot.
It's so funny that it happened to you too.
Yeah.
Here's what I learned when I fell. What'd you learn? Like, oh, falling is normal.
Yeah.
I'm not terrible, and I'm now going to keep going. So
that's one of the things that's so interesting about my time. It is so funny. I know if I have had time with the Lord by how others-centric I get, how encouraging I get.
Yeah.
It is 100% true all the time. It's almost like a litmus paper test for me. I'm like, am I in a good place? Well, yeah, I sent some texts to someone. I was telling somebody. I'm like, oh, okay. Like everything feels pretty groovy.
It's aligned.
But it's like, and then obviously the opposite is I'm just like all eyes on me all the time. Go. And so I think for me, I think if you have been blessed by benevolence, it is hard not to be benevolent.
100%.
And so that's a part of culture as I think about my life in the next season, in this sort of second half of my life. It's a huge passion of mine. That's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. Is what does it look like for me to try to have some formal setting to do that, to spend time, because I was. That's my story, is people's benevolence, is people stepping out of their lives and going like, hey, like you got a cool thing going. You know?
We've got this sign that we made Home Depot style over the dining room table, and one of the last words, it's a Luke verse that's just twisted a tiny, and it says, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just this reminder, I mean, like, man, there's privilege that exists here. There's been so much opportunity afforded. I do, feel grateful for the way that potential was placed in me, and I hope to think that I'm honoring that intention and unleashing it. But man, there also comes some responsibility with
Yeah.
it. And I love that. I hope that there is something formal that shows up.
Well,
People
I
will be
tell you
lucky to
that,
have you, man.
I tell you the thing, and I'll say this. I think the thing that I keep getting challenged by is like, it is not fair for me to expect that from other people if I'm not doing myself. Because I think if I can do that for my younger friends, especially who are doing music, that's the space that that translates the best. I just think, I hope and think they're probably going to do it too.
Yeah.
And so it starts with me. It's like, it's not fair to me sit with my cronies, my community, and be like, hey guys, come on, like, let's get up and go. When it's like, well, hold on, let me just do my part.
Yeah.
And then at least I can see the fruit of that and hope that others do the same.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing is I find myself sort of like, why aren't we? And I'm like,
By the way, though, your recognition that you were the beneficiary of people taking you under them. The idea that others were taking you under your wing was something that encouraged you. And if you can do it for someone else, it creates this like generational thing that maybe has them coming up and deciding to look back over and help pull somebody up too.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
All right, as I was walking in here, there are like 1,000 bikes on the side of your house.
Those are all mine.
Yeah,
Every size.
which by the way, a great collection.
It's training.
No,
It's really good for
it's
quads.
a really great collection, especially the smaller ones. I just can't imagine the speed.
Those really worth
Really good on the quads. So you're the dad of 3 humans, is this correct?
Yes.
You have a podcast called Dadville,
Yeah.
which is fantastic
Oh,
with
thank
John. Talk about the kind of courage it takes to be a great dad.
Oh my God. I don't know there's anything that takes more courage.
Right?
It's so, you know what I think is so hard about it is that it's just gelatinous in nature. It is always moving. It's always changing.
I've never heard it described as gelatinous, but it is totally gelatinous.
The minute you kind of go like, I think I've got this. Your kid's like, I'm not like that anymore. You're like, oh my gosh. You know, so I think it takes a lot of courage. And you know, I think the thing that I've thought about the most lately in that space is the courage it takes for me to be present. Mike Donahue from 10th Avenue North was on the podcast a couple days ago, and he said something that really, and I feel like every interview we have, somebody says something that I'm like, so it's a completely selfish act. Like people are like, so great you're doing anything. I'm like, totally. This benevolence. Meanwhile, just the notes I've taken. Oh my gosh, I feel like we should put a book out. And if anyone out there is interested. But you know, I'm like, I think there is something, he said, that one of the best, he said, anytime I've ever seen a family where I see the kids and I'm like, you have great kids. And I talk to the parents, they say the exact same thing. So of course, John and I are like on his face.
Lean on in.
They're like pressing my ear into his mouth. But he said, they just say to pay attention.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I thought, that is one of the hardest things for me because it makes me have to be present.
Yeah.
Which takes so much work for me.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking of the future. I'm everywhere but where I am in that moment so many times. So I think for me, the courage is to not get anxious about something I'm either wanting to escape to make myself feel better or that the moment's hard and I just want to be in it, you know? But that is always the thing that takes the most work for me is the present, is just to be where I am. If that's somebody screaming at me, if that's the best moment we're having, but just to go, I just want to be here and pay attention.
Yeah. It's so crazy because if I made a mistake coming into fatherhood, it was that I thought I'd be the same dad to all of my children.
Yes.
And I have 4 kids.
Yeah.
I have a high schooler, a middle schooler, an elementary schooler, and a preschooler. There are 4 kids, 4 schools, 4 drop-offs.
Oh my gosh.
It's a thing, but also 4 really unique and distinct personalities, different love languages, different interests and passions and everything. And so what's even crazier on top of what you just said is that now me being interested or present requires meeting them where they are, which is now like, oh, I'm going to be out playing catch with one and digging in dirt with another and dancing in a tutu with another. Right? Like it's just all that. The presence is now on another level if you truly want to have them feel like they are seen. And I think that's what every one of our kids wants.
There's a moment, I just watched The Chosen. It wrecked me. I basically just cried for 8 episodes. I was just like, oh my God, doesn't it seem like you'd have been the greatest guy? And but he walks in, this moment just wrecked me. He walks in, and you know, this is a fictitious moment, obviously, so you got to be careful about these things. But I just thought it was beautiful all the same. But he's talking to Peter's wife, and I forget, but he just says, I just want you to know I see you. And I was like, toast.
Yep.
Toast.
That's what at a basic level all humans
Everybody wants.
That's what all of us want.
So when Mike said that yesterday, we talked about this on the podcast, that scene in the show, but it just so clicked with me. I was like, I think, if I can just do that with my kids, I just, that's my new focus. I feel like that's the thing for me is like, when they go, hey, Dad, I'm not,
Still phone in hand.
Or like,
Yeah.
we're going like, and I mean, you got to be careful because at some point, life is life and you can't just like drop everything all the time. But I think for me, that's been the new courage is kind of being like, all right, I'm going to try to be sort of bold and step into these moments and trust that if I am letting something go or that thing will be okay.
It'll be fine.
But this is the priority for these next however many years.
All right. So then flip side, how do you encourage your children to be courageous? How do you encourage them to be brave enough to walk toward their fear for the opportunity to grow or to step into who they're here to be?
The thing that I've been really convicted about lately is like, this is such a terrible example.
I love it already.
This is amazing. So I think I'll tell you what I think I'm learning, then I'll tell you the story, but I think I'm learning I really have to show that to them with my life.
Totally agree.
And my kids were at this is amazing. They were at the jungle gym. So they got the monkey bars. And the boys are just bound. So I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old and the two boys and the girl in the middle. And the boys were just bound and determined they're gonna get these monkey bars. Well, they're doing pretty good. And I'm not gonna say it's God or the Holy Spirit, but it's just been, I've felt so strongly in those moments, I gotta do it too. It's just not, I don't wanna be that dad who's the armchair quarterback, who's like, do better. And I'm like, like just paunched and like, run faster. You're so out of shape, So I was like, all right, I gotta do these monkey bars. And so they're looking at me and I'm like, you guys, let me show, and I think I literally said, let me show you. And so by the grace of God, and I mean that as a prayer of thanks, I got across them. David, I got to the other side and I slowly lowered my arms. And I remember thinking, is it 2 torn labrums? It could be. I literally thought, we may have to go to the ER. But I couldn't tell you how excited that I was that I got to the other side.
You modeled those monkey bars.
Jesus, every grip was a prayer. I was just like, please, because they were watching, just like hawks.
So good.
So I think that's been kind of something new for me is like, I just don't want to, and it's hard, I think it's hard for any parent not to do that because you probably did do whatever they've done. So you do have some sense of like, oh, I did that, but to re-enter some of those moments and go like, okay, if you're not going to do that, maybe I just not do that with you. Or you're going to do that, well, then I'll do it with you. If you want to start running, what if it looks like for me to get up and do that with you more than I already do? Okay,
right.
But I think that's something for me that I'm like, I just feel like it feels like that's a dad thing to do is just to be like, okay, I'm gonna, again, it's an interest. I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
And if I'm paying attention, you want to do that, man,
it works.
What greater gift than your time?
Yeah. So good. I love that. All right, bringing it back to the patio, the now covered, air conditioned, beautiful.
We had this built
rugs
for this,
on the ground. I mean, it's just lovely. I mean,
this wasn't here yesterday.
No, that you built it in anticipation of me coming to town with this small film crew. And I like you for that.
Well,
you brought a bonsai tree in here.
Yeah, do you like that?
I want to give you credit for walking around with small trees.
If it's not dead, it's gasping its very last breath.
Well, it looks lovely. I don't know anything about bonsai trees. So, this space for you, it's a place where you create.
Yeah.
What else? Like what? Tell me about this. Tell me about this place that we're in because I'm always interested in like where the thing that you have the most passion for in life also happens to take place.
Yeah, there's a lot of things about this room. So when we built the house, I really wanted to have a studio I could work in. So we built this right after we built the house. Rooms for writing are really fascinating places because I write a lot by myself. In fact, I write almost all of my own music for myself by myself. So it's
if people don't know, will you just say, like, you've written for some pretty big artists.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest things? Before you continue, I just interrupted, but I want you to brag. Come on, you can flex while you do it. That's
what
fine.
if I had them tattooed? I'll just show you.
That would be amazing.
No, the biggest one that really set everything off is I had a song that I recorded and put out called God Gave Me You that then Blake Shelton recorded and had a big hit with.
Yeah.
And since then it's been fun because that sort of started people recording songs and all that. But then another song called Craving You that Thomas Rhett did with Maren Morris. But right now what's fun is I have a song with Lady A called Like a Lady that's from personal experience. And that's doing really well, which is really
so
fun.
Good.
That's always such a fun season because I have my artistry that I do and just played the Ryman a couple weeks ago myself.
Amazing.
So it's just fun to dabble. It's fun to have some things that like But that's as a writer, one of the funnest things is when you have a song that's on the chart and you're just kind of like,
it's amazing.
It's moving. So that's I'm really thankful for that. Yeah, I mean, so do that. So there's, like I said, there's kind of my artistry, and then I write for other people. So I'm in here a lot by myself. It's kind of a sanctuary. It's a safe, quiet space for me to work my things out and pace and write, and very cathartic, very calm, It's amazing because I'm a pretty extreme extrovert, but I realized probably 15 years ago when I was starting my career, I would have these days where I was by myself for hours at a time. And I was living with my best friend at the time before we each got married, and I would look up and he'd get home at 4:30 or 5, and I'd be like, is it 5?
Wow.
And like, I spent a whole day by myself. Like, look at me.
I'm a grown-up
But
now.
then that's exactly it. What do I get? Do I get a car or insurance or something? Taxes? But I remember it became a pretty vital part of how I created. Like, it went from like, oh, I can do this, to almost like, I gotta kind of have this now.
Yeah.
So that's this. I tell you the other thing that I love about it is the co-creative space. To me is what's so fun, because you have people come in to write, and you spend an hour, sometimes 2, catching up, talking life, sharing experiences, encouraging, like listening, and then you create these things. And so it's a really fun space for me too, because not only is it from what I create and I do, but it's a shared space.
Yeah.
So that's what's so interesting about, like you said, these sort of peaceful places is you hope people feel that too. You want people to walk. That was something that really meant a lot to me. And so it mattered to me when we were making it, was I don't want this to be just something that feels like my little man cave, and I hope you guys, because I write with a lot of women. I was like, I want this to feel like anybody that comes in goes, man, it just feels great in here. I feel like I can be free and be creative. And so that's a big part of it too, is sort of not just having a place that I like, but a place that sort of feels communal.
It's welcoming.
Yeah, it's welcoming.
As a person who's been welcomed in, it's welcoming.
That's good. I appreciate it.
I like a studio. I don't go to many. Though I am recording the audiobook.
Oh, yeah.
This book, August 30th and 31st, in Willie Nelson's studio in Austin.
Dude.
I mean,
You're gonna be
I'm going to
so
just take a little bit of the
contact
vibe, and also probably a little high. You're right.
They're just gonna notice, like, as you read,
The
it
book
gets
is
slower.
great, and then it just starts slowing down.
They just have like, hey, hour 2, we need to stop Dave.
By the end, I'm just reading Green Lights from Matthew McConaughey, and I don't know
laughing.
why.
And
It's just like,
laughing the
oh
entire
my
time.
goodness, this is
Like, who never heard
crazy.
him giggle like
This is crazy.
That
all
would
right.
be amazing.
Last question. I'm going to turn this into the podcast for Rise Together as well, and I ask this same question of any guest that comes on every single time, which is just a simple, if you had a piece of advice, whether it's a thought, a single thing that you'd hope someone might do this week.
Yeah.
What's like the one thing that you would throw out to try and encourage or challenge somebody to get closer to peace?
I think there's a million things that people have probably said that are like really wonderful spiritual biblical things. I think the thing that is the piece of advice that is extra biblical, like not from what God has said directly, for me, is a quote that changed my life, and I still reference this quote almost daily. And it is this: whenever we come together, sharing our strengths, it breeds competition. Whenever we come together, sharing our weaknesses, it breeds community.
Ooh.
To me, I'm like,
so good.
So that's
so good.
I love that quote. Yeah.
Dave Barnes.
Yeah.
Good man. I appreciate you bringing me to the studio,
yes,
dude.
Of course.
All right.